Are you dying to get started with investing, but you have literally no idea where to start? I feel you. 2.5 years ago, I couldn't tell you what an IRA was, or an index fund, or a 401k, or how you even make money by investing. But now I have almost $200,000 invested, and I tell you what, I am not special. Everything that I did to invest that money and grow it up to $200,000 really wasn't all that complicated. So in today's video, I'm going to help take away some of the overwhelm that comes with being a new investor, and we're going to talk about 2 key ways to start investing even if you have zero knowledge about investing in the stock market. So stick around and we'll get to it. But before we do, we gotta get 2 things really clear first. Since we're talking about investing, I need you to understand that I'm not a financial advisor, I'm not a financial professional. Everything that I've done is self-taught. And while today I'm gonna give you my opinions on some things and give you some education, that's all it is. It's education. It is not financial advice, and it's not meant to be construed as financial advice. It's supposed to be a starting place for you to do your own research. So if you've got that clear and you understand that this is not financial advice, it's just education in my opinion, let's get to it. But before we do, be sure to hit the like button, hit subscribe. It helps my channel out a ton. As a small channel, I'm relying on you guys to hit those like buttons, hit those subscribe buttons so that you can continue to hear from me. Now, before we get started, I do want to mention that if you haven't already watched my How to Start Investing as a Beginner series, you might want to check those out first. This is going to make a lot more sense if you've already watched those videos. So I'll link those down in the description, and I'll also put a link to one of the videos here. So the first way is through target date funds. Target date funds are these really cool investment vehicles that allow you to basically invest your money in a portfolio of different assets. And you don't have to do anything. You buy one thing that's going to have a bunch of different things inside of it. Now let's use an example, right? So up on the screen, I've pulled up Target Date Fund 2060 and Target Date Fund 2035. Now these are both Vanguard funds, but what you'll notice is inside of each Target Date Fund, there's a bunch of different things. There are stocks in the US, there are stocks in the international market, there are bonds, and a whole bunch of other things inside of here. What's cool about it is when you pick a target date fund, it's going to automatically rebalance from more heavy in stocks into more heavy in bonds the closer you get to your target date. So for example, right now in the Vanguard 2060 fund, we have a target date of 2060. That means this person is not planning on accessing the money inside of the target date fund until the year 2060. Now, currently, since 2060 is about 40 years away, of course, this portfolio is going to have a lot more stocks inside of it instead of having a lot of bonds. Keep in mind, the reason for this is because bonds are generally used for wealth preservation rather than wealth accumulation. Wealth accumulation is where you're trying to build wealth. You're trying to develop a wealth that you can retire with, essentially. When you're in your early 20s or your early 30s, you probably don't have a lot of wealth to preserve. So target date funds know this. They know you still have 40 years, so you're focusing on growth over the next probably 20, 30 years. So they're going to put you heavier in stocks until you get closer to your target date. So for example, this target date fund 2060 has over 90% stocks inside of it, and the rest is in bonds. Now keep in mind, if you purchased Vanguard Target Date 2060, you didn't have to pick the things that are inside of it. This whole portfolio of every single stock in the US market, every single stock in the international market, all of the bonds in the US, that was picked for you inside of the target date fund. You didn't have to do anything. All you had to do was pick whichever date you wanted to retire and pick the corresponding fund. Now, what's really cool about these is that they're going to slowly reallocate from 90% stocks into a little bit more bonds the closer that you get to retirement. So if we pull up a Vanguard 2030 fund, we'll see here that there's a lot more bonds inside of the portfolio. About 65% of this target date fund is invested in stocks, while the rest of the portfolio is invested in bonds. Why? Because we're in year 2022. So that means this person is planning on accessing this money in about 8 years. So they've moved from wealth accumulation to wealth preservation with a little bit of wealth accumulation. So you still want to have those stocks inside of there to continue to grow the portfolio, but having about 35% bonds is really going to help protect the money that has already been accumulated from experiencing the same volatility that you'll experience with stocks. Now keep in mind, a 2030 fund used to look like a 2060 fund 40 years ago. But now, since we're 8 years away from retirement, this is going to look like a lot more conservative portfolio than our 2060 fund, because the person who's investing in the 2060 fund has 40 years before they plan to retire. That means they can ride out the cycles of the stock market and they can deal with crashes because they have a lot longer time horizon to make up for those crashes. When you only have 8 years left before you plan to retire, well, you don't have as much time to make up for those crashes in the market. That's why the 2030 fund has 35% of its portfolio in bonds. Now, again, you would not have to do anything to have that fund automatically reallocate the closer you get to retirement. It's gonna do that by the very nature of what it is. That's its whole purpose, is to reallocate for you. Target date funds were kind of designed to be that hands-off investing for people who don't know what to invest in and have no desire to invest their own money or pick their own investments. So target date funds are a really great solution. Vanguard target date funds specifically are pretty low fee, but if you look at other brokerages and things like that, be sure to check out what the expense ratios are. Most of the time when I see Vanguard and Fidelity's target date funds, they're usually about 0.15% or all the way down to 0.08%, but you want to definitely keep those fees as low as possible. Now, you're probably wondering, well, what's the downside here? Like, this sounds too good to be true, right? The only downside with target date funds is that you can't customize them. So sure, you could pick whatever date you want. It doesn't matter when you plan to retire. If you want a more conservative portfolio right now, but you don't plan to retire till 2060, you could theoretically pick a 2040 fund if you wanted to, because you were nervous and you wanted to be more conservative. In comparison to how I personally like to invest, personally, I think that if you're in your 20s or 30s, you probably don't need all the way up to 10% bonds, but at the same time, some people might consider that really aggressive. Vanguard has the lowest expense ratio target date funds that I have seen out there, and they're also very diversified. With the target date funds that we looked at, with just those two funds that were inside of the target date fund, you literally have every single stock in the world inside of it, which is pretty hard to beat. But generally what I always tell people is I would rather you be invested in a target date fund than not be invested at all. And honestly, for most people, I'd probably rather have you be invested in a target date fund than using a financial advisor who may or may not have your best interests in mind. So definitely look into target date funds. I think they're a great option, especially if you're like sitting there like, I have no idea what I should be investing in. Somebody just tell me what to invest in. Now, the second thing that really requires little to no knowledge about investing, and honestly, I think that it requires almost no knowledge at all, is using something called a robo-advisor. Now, a robo-advisor is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically a robot that is managing your money for you. Okay, it's not actually a robot, but it's an algorithm. So instead of using a human financial advisor who is going to be prone to thinking about themselves, looking for big commissions, maybe having their emotions get in the way when it comes to investing. Instead, you have an algorithm that is literally going to take a bunch of data from you, and then they're gonna output what they think that you should be invested in based off of the data that you give it. So there's some really cool ones out there, and there are some pros and cons to each one, but generally the robo-advisors that I like the most are M1 Finance, Betterment, and Ellevest, and there are pros and cons to each one of those. M1 Finance, what I really like about M1 Finance is that they're completely free. They're a totally free platform if you want to use their basic investing services. And while they're not a pure robo-advisor that will literally just, go ahead, like manage your money after you take a survey, they do have over 80 different portfolios for you to pick from for free. But what's also really cool about them is that you can also decide to design your own portfolio if you want. What's also cool about M1 Finance, and this video is not sponsored by M1 Finance, but like if you guys want to sponsor me, give me a holler. But what's also cool about them is that you do not have any minimums in order to invest. You can put in $500, you could put in $50. There's not going to be a minimum investment required to have an account. Now, the other robo-advisor that I think is great, has some pros and cons, is Betterment. Betterment has been around for a while. They're a pure robo-advisor. They're going to ask you a bunch of different questions. They're going to find out a little bit about you so that they can recommend a portfolio based off of your needs. What's nice about Betterment is that, yes, they have those retirement accounts that we were talking about earlier. They have these automated investment portfolios that, again, you don't need to know anything about in order to start investing. But what I don't like about Betterment is that they only have like 30 different securities for you to pick from, which if you go to customize and you decide you want to be customizing it with some stuff that they don't offer, you're kind of SOL and you got to transfer out of the brokerage or start a new brokerage somewhere else. But in terms of like hands-off investing with low-cost index funds that are going to be diversified and really hands-off, Betterment is a great option. Betterment does have a fee. I believe their fee right now is 0.25% per year, but generally when you're working with a financial advisor, usually your fees are 1% or more, so 0.25% is about a fourth the price of that, so not bad. Now, the third robo-advisor that I really like, especially for women, is Ellevest. Ellevest is a really great robo-advisor that, again, is a pure robo-advisor. They are going to ask you a bunch of questions and then they are going to recommend you a portfolio based off of the answers that you gave. They're easy. Just like M1 Finance, Betterment, and Ellevest, they all have a really great app that's very easy to work with, and they're literally going to make investing as easy as something that you can do within 10 minutes, set it up and totally forget it. Now, I forgot to mention, each one of these options that I'm talking about all offer the ability for you to automate your investments as well, which is really nice. What's specifically cool about Ellevest, they are a created by women for women investment platform that really focuses on navigating the challenges that women have in investing, and it also takes into consideration when doing projections and things like that and anticipating how much you may have in retirement if you put X amount of money in. They take into consideration all of the different things that women face, like future career breaks and potential earnings. Now, Ellevest is also very low fee. I believe their plans start from $1 all the way up to $9. If you want to use their account that offers retirement accounts, you're going to have to do the $5 a month plan, but again, they're going to make investing really hands-off, really easy. Now, the biggest downside that I see with Ellevest is that they do not offer any flexibility right now. Again, if you spend 2 years learning how to invest and you decide, I don't really like this portfolio that they've got me in, they only have 2 portfolio options, and if you don't like the investments that are in there, you're kind of SOL. But if you want easy, hands-off investing that's going to be in diversified low-cost index funds, Ellevest is another great option. Each of these options, the target date funds, M1 Finance, Betterment, Ellevest, these are all things that you can do in less than 10 minutes with honestly very little information on how to start investing. These things are going to do it for you, and I think that these are really great options while you're still learning. Now, do I think that they're the end-all be-all and you should only use these for the rest of your life? Personally, I'm on the side of I think that everybody should learn a little bit about how to invest. I understand that there are people out there who will never want to learn how to invest, and that's okay. These are perfectly fine investments to help you invest for the rest of your life. But if you get to the point where you do want more diversification or you do want to get a little bit more aggressive, then you might eventually graduate out of using target date funds or robo-advisors and you can go into DIY brokerages like Fidelity or Vanguard. So use these options as a way to start researching. There is no excuse to not be investing, especially when you can be investing as little as $5 a month. And there are so many services out there that make investing as easy as possible, even if you don't know anything about investing. I wish I had known about these 10 years ago so I could start throwing money into a target date fund when I had no idea what I was doing. And then when I was 29 years old and starting to learn about investing for the first time, I would have started making changes and things like that, but at least I would have still been invested. So that is all I've got for you guys today. I am so excited for you guys to get started with investing, but if you have any questions, be sure to hit me up down in the comments. I will be happy to answer. I try to answer all of my comments, but if you've made it this far and you haven't hit liked or you haven't hit subscribe, be sure to do those things. It helps me out a lot. Thanks so much, and I'll see you guys next week.